The first time I heard the words, they came like a thunderclap after a long silence. "I heard you want a wife. My daughter is perfect for you," said the Apache woman. I helped. I remember the way her voice carried through the dusty stillness of that late afternoon, cutting sharper than the wind that rolled off the hills. I had not expected such a thing. Not there. Not then. Her eyes, dark as the soil after rain, held something between gratitude and determination. And though I couldn't make sense of it all, I felt in my bones that nothing in my life would remain the same after that moment. It had been a season of change in our little settlement. One of those American villages tucked deep into the valley where the railway had just begun to stretch its iron fingers. The year was somewhere in the late 1800s, when the land was still raw and people carried more scars than possessions. Our village was a place of creaking porches, oil lamps burning deep into the night, and a single dusty road that cut through it like a vein of stubborn survival. The blacksmith's hammer was the morning's rooster, and the church bell its evening prayer. We were all held together by work, need, and sometimes by secrets we barely dared to whisper. I had been one of those drifting souls who arrived with no kin and no past worth speaking of. My hands were good for work, and so I stayed. Folks here never asked too much so long as you pulled your weight. I worked at the mill, fixing what broke and hauling what needed hauling. The villagers called me a steady sort of man, though they didn't know how many storms raged inside me at night. It was easier that way, to let people think you were built of stone. That day, I had been out beyond the edge of the settlement, chasing after a stray mule. The beast had wandered further than most dared, past the creek where the willows leaned, and into the brushland that marked the beginning of Apache hunting grounds. Folks often spoke of it with lowered voices. Those lands were not ours, though many pretended they could be. I didn't plan to linger, only to fetch the mule before nightfall made the land too dangerous. That was when I found her at first. I thought the figure on the ground was just another shadow. But as I drew closer, I saw the torn fabric, the blood, darkened against her arm, and the way her breathing rattled like dry leaves in the wind. She was an Apache woman, her face drawn with both pain and pride, refusing to let her eyes close. I don't know what made me kneel beside her. Perhaps it was the stubborn streak that comes when you've been alone too long. Or maybe it was just the simple truth that no person, no matter who, should be left to die like a wounded animal under the open sky. I tore strips from my shirt, bound her arm as best I could, and gave her water from my canteen. She looked at me with eyes that seemed to weigh every choice I had ever made, as though she could see right through the walls I had built around myself. I expected anger, suspicion, perhaps even hatred, but what I saw was something else, something I could not name. For 3 days I returned to that hidden grove with food and water, each time expecting to find her gone. Yet each time she was there, stronger than before, watching me with that same searching gaze. She never spoke, not until that last evening when the sky bled red across the hills. She stood on her own, her back straight though her arm was still, bound. That was when she said the words that had been echoing in my mind ever since. "I heard you want a wife. My daughter is perfect for you." The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. Marriage? A daughter? What business had I in such things? I was a man with no family, no claim, no roots deep enough to anchor even myself. And yet she said it with the certainty of someone declaring the weather, as though it had already been decided long before I stumbled upon her wounded body. I tried to speak, but the words tangled in my throat. I wanted to tell her I hadn't asked for such a thing, that I wasn't worthy of it, that I hadn't even thought of it. But I also wanted to know more about her daughter, about why fate had chosen to throw me into the middle of this strange crossing of lives. The wind rustled the brush around us, carrying with it the smell of wood smoke from the village far behind me. I thought of the people there, the widows, the weary men, the children running barefoot down the street. They would never understand. They would whisper behind closed doors if they even guessed at what was unfolding. An Apache woman offering her daughter to a man like me? It was the kind of story that could shake the walls of our quiet little village. She must have seen the storm in my eyes, because she stepped closer, her voice softer now, but carrying the same unshakable will. "You saved me. A man does not do that for nothing. You say you have no family? Then you will have one." I felt the weight of her words settle on my chest. I thought of the nights I had spent staring at the ceiling of the cabin I built with my own hands, listening to the silence that pressed heavier than any burden. I thought of the emptiness I carried like a second skin, of the longing I never dared to admit, and yet what was being asked of me was no small thing. It was a crossing of two worlds that rarely met in peace, a union that could stir both hope and hatred. I looked at her then, standing tall, despite her wounds, and wondered what kind of daughter she could raise, what kind of life such a family might hold. Before I could ask her name, before I could even gather my breath, she turned and began to walk into the brush, her figure swallowed by the fading light. The words she left behind lingered in the air, heavy as the dust that clung to my boots. I stood there, mule forgotten, the whole world suddenly tilting on its axis. Something had been set in motion, something I could neither stop nor understand. All I knew was that I would never again look at the road, the village, or even myself in the same way, and as the last of the daylight slipped away, I realized I had a choice to make: follow the path she had set before me, or turn back to the life I had always known. But as I started back toward the village, my heart heavy with questions, I couldn't help but feel that the choice had already been made for me. Morning came slow, graining the windows with a thin white light. I rose with the mill bell as I always did, but work felt different, as if every board and gear was waiting to hear what I would do about the Apache woman's words. The river ran cold that day, carrying sawdust and twigs like little boats. Men spoke in their plain way about fences and feed, about the railway that kept creeping past the ridge, one spike at a time. No one knew what had happened out there beyond the willows. I kept my mouth closed, but the weight in my chest walked with me from task to task, a shadow that would not leave by noon. The talk at the mill shifted to rails and timber orders. The foreman wanted more beams laid out for a crew coming next week. The railway had a hunger that never ended, and our small settlement was happy to feed it if it meant a few more coins and a link to somewhere else. The iron road had already changed us. New faces showed up, then moved on. The old American village we knew began to twitch like a living thing, growing new limbs while the old ones stiffened. There was a time when a stranger would be noticed by sundown. Now a man could pass through and leave by dawn, with no one recalling his hat color. I kept thinking about that grove, about the woman's arm wrapped tight with my shirt strips. She had moved like a person who did not ask for help and did not like receiving it. Yet she had stood there and said a line that pulled the ground out from under me. A wife, a daughter. The late 1800s were full of such barters. People said marriages, struck to bind families, to trade land, to settle a debt of honor. But this felt like something else, like a bridge thrown over a canyon and daring me to set foot on it. After we finished stacking lumber, I walked the road past the livery and the half-built depot. Children were chasing each other around wagon ruts, their bare feet drumming a steady rhythm. Old man Harold sat on his porch mending a saddle, eyes half shut against the bright dust. He looked up as I passed and tipped his chin the way he did when he sensed news but didn't have a name for it. I nodded and kept on. My cabin sat at the edge of the settlement near a strip of cottonwoods. The place was plain: one bed, a stove, a chair I had patched 3 times, and a shelf with a few books whose pages kept the smell of smoke. I lit the oil lamp and stood there with my hands on the table, trying to find a reason not to go back to the grove. I cleaned up first. I don't know why that mattered, but it did. I shaved with a blade that had seen better days, brushed the trail dust off my coat, and checked my boots for loose nails. Then I took a length of dried meat and a small tin of beans. It felt right to bring something, even if I didn't know who might be there. I stepped into the long light of evening, the color going from gold to the thin blue that comes before night. The settlement fell behind me in a hush. Only the sound of the river, the call of a lone bird, the creak of my leather as I moved. Past the creek, past the leaned willows, the land opened and the old Wapenin scent, brush bending low, a horizon that kept its secrets. I followed the faint marks that my boots and the mule had left the other day, the kind of signs only a man looking for them would see. When I reached the grove, I slowed. The place had a silence that was not empty. The feel of being watched. Not the kind that sets you running. It's just the kind that makes your spine tighten with respect. She was there already, standing near a ragged juniper. Her arm was no longer bound in my shirt cloth. The wound had been tended in a way more skilled than my rough work clean strips, sap worked under the edges, a wrap that did not pinch. She had come back with help, or she had done it herself, with tools I could not see. Whatever the answer, it told me enough to mind my words. I held up the food as a plain offering. She didn't take it. She only motioned for me to set it on a flat stone. I stood in a careful quiet. "You returned," she said. "I did." "Why, that is a fair question," I said. "Maybe because you left a bigger one in me than I could carry alone." At that, I thought I saw the smallest line at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile yet, but something willing to become one if the world allowed. "My people saw you," she said. "They said you came each day with water. You did not bring men. You did not follow me when I walked away. I wasn't sure I should," I said. "I don't know your ways. I barely know my own." She nodded once, as if the plain truth was better than a proud story. Then she lifted her chin toward the far low hills. "You say you have no family?" "That is what I heard from the woman who gives bread near the church." I felt my face heat without reason. "She talks too much. She talks like a river," the woman said, and now the line at her mouth did become a smile, though it softened fast. "A river keeps things alive, but a river can drown those who cannot swim." I let the words sit between us like warm stones. "You said something yesterday," I said at last, "about your daughter." "I did." "Do you mean to bind me?" "To a promise I did not make." The question came out rougher than I intended. The land around us seemed to lean in, waiting for her answer. "No promise," she said. "Not yet. Psst. A path laid before your feet, that is all. A path you can step on or walk away from. But the ground is changing, village man. The railway eats fast. Your people stretch their fences, or hunters travel farther for less. A path can keep two from falling." I took that in slow. It did not sound like money or debt. It sounded like a matter of survival, and not only for them around us. The brush swayed with a small wind. The sun slid lower, a red coin rolling along the ridge. I thought of the settlement, the way some folks talked, sharp, careless, afraid. I thought of how the word Apache could tighten a room like a fist. I could hear the questions already, the warnings, the voices that spoke as if fear were wisdom. "What would your people say?" I asked. "They will say what people say. When a fence is moved," she answered, "some will fight. Some will watch. Some will go slow and still arrive." She pointed at the stone where I had set the food. "You brought meat. You brought beans. You know how to be a man in the old American way? But do you know how to listen?" "I think I do," I said. It sounded weak even to me. She studied my face for a long time. I could feel her search, like fingertips brushing a knot in a rope, testing where it might slip. Then she pointed to a circle of earth cleared near the juniper. "Sit. I will speak. Then you will speak." We sat on the ground, knees nearly level. The brush snapped now and then. A cricket tried on a song and then thought better of it. She began with a tale not of war or raids or harsh winters, but of a spring 3 years back when the river ran too loud. Her people had moved camp to higher ground. A fever swept the children. She lost a son that way, she said, her voice steady, but the words leaving a trace in the air like smoke. I did not say I was sorry. The feeling rose in me, but I sensed this was not a place for such easy speech. The story was not told to gain pity. It was laid down like a map showing places I did not know. When she finished, she told me her name. It felt strange in my mouth, and I did not try to repeat it wrong. I gave her mine. We sat a while with that trade. She told me her daughter's age, old enough to keep a fire, to tan a hide, to stitch with sinew. Old enough to make her own choice. 2, I noted, which she affirmed with a single tap of her finger against the earth. "She knows of you in the way a hawk knows the wind," she said, "not by seeing it, but by what it moves." I asked how she had been hurt. "The hills again." "A horse threw me," she said. It is not the worst thing that can happen on a hunt. She did not add anything more, and I did not press. A man can hear the edge of a story and know he is not meant to step beyond it. Night came close. First star found its place. I asked if I might meet the daughter. The woman stood. The manner of a person who has chosen how far today will go. Not yet, she said. The settlement watches you. We watch you too. There are those who would see a marriage between a village man and an Apache daughter as a wound. There are those who would see it as a stitch. Before a stitch, the wound must be cleaned. How do I do that? I asked. You work as you have. You keep your hands clean and your face to the sun when night rises. You do not boast about what you do not understand. And when a man speaks fear in the name of safety, you do not answer him with fear. She paused. A day will come soon. Will be asked a question in front of others. Your answer will set stones in a wall you cannot move later. What question? You will know it when it comes, she said. It will sound like something small, but small things are the ones that break a wheel or make it turn. She took a step back into the dim. I felt the same pull as before, a rope laid loose at my feet. If I follow this path, I said, what do I owe you? She shook her head once. You owe no one anything yet. Accept the truth as you can find it. And this, if you meet my daughter, you will see her. Not what the settlement says she is. Not what your past says she cannot be. It's only who she is on that day. Her voice softened. If you cannot do that, the path ends where you stand. I thought of the village lights winking on, the little line of oil lamps and window frames, the church bell that would soon mark the evening. I thought of my cabin with its one chair and its quiet that grew too big some nights. I thought of the men at the mill and their easy talk that dried like straw when a hard wind came. I thought of a girl I could not picture and the way the land would tilt if I did. I hear you, I said. She nodded. Then she did something I did not expect. She reached into a small leather pouch and drew out a narrow strip of woven fiber, rough but worked with patience. She set it on the stone by the food. Take this, she said. It is not a token. It is a mark for yourself. You hold it, ask what kind of man you are, then answer with your hands. I took the strip. It was lighter than it looked, but strong. I did not know how to thank her in a way that fit. So I stood and made a small bow that felt honest. When I looked up, she had already turned. The brush took her, soundless. I walked back to the settlement in darkness. The stars were like nails driven deep into a roof to keep it from blowing off. At the edge of the village, I heard laughter coming from the saloon. I could picture the faces there, ruddy from drink, eager for stories that made them feel larger. I kept to the alley behind the livery. My cabin door creaked the way it always did, like an old friend telling me not to wake the neighbors. I lit the lamp. The woven strip lay on the table, the lamp's light pulling small shadows from each fiber. I ate a little and tried to sleep. The night did not care to let me. The next day at the mill, a man I didn't know well sidled up to me. He had the look of a person who enjoys starting fires with other men's matches. Here there's been some trouble out past the creek, he said. Word is the Apaches are biting at our edges again. Folks say one of them got patched up by a village hand. You hear anything like that? I felt the words like splinters. I made my face empty. I heard the same talk you heard, I said. Talk goes where it wants. He studied me. Well, keep your eyes open. Railway men don't like surprises. You've got rifles and time. He smirked. You may want a wife one day, but pick a safe one. No sense courting a storm. There it was. It's a small thing that could turn a wheel. I felt the woven strip in my pocket, the braid pressing a soft line against my palm. I thought of what the woman had said about fear dressed up like safety. Words rose in me, heavy with heat, but I let them pass without sound. This was not the moment on the town square or the church steps. This was a test of a different sort. I gave him a half nod and went back to stacking beams. He laughed to himself and wandered off. All day I caught the glances of others. The way people look when they don't yet have a story but are hungry for one. I gave them nothing to chew on. When the bell rang, I washed at the pump behind the mill and started for the road. The foreman called my name, told me the railway crew had moved up their arrival. It would be here by Saturday with a foreman of their own, a man known for making quick demands. Be ready for long hours, he said, for trouble if the hunters come near the work line. That night the wind rose. Loose shingles rattled across the settlement like playing cards. I sat at my table and rolled the woven strip between my fingers until the pattern lay clear in my mind. I tried to imagine the daughter's face and failed again. I could see only a pair of eyes, steady, weighing. I kept hearing the warning. A question would come in front of others. I wondered if it would be about the railway, about boundaries, about a fence moved a foot and called progress, or if it would be about marriage spoken in a crowded room where silence could be mistaken for shame. I slept late in the morning, the first time in months. The church bell had to call me twice. When I finally walked out, the road was already busy, wagons bringing in sacks and wood. Near the depot site, a new sign had been posted on a stake. I went closer. It was a notice in block letters, smart and heavy, from the railway office to towns over. It spoke of right-of-way, of land use, of safety rules about who could walk where. And at the bottom, in a neat line, it said trespassers would be questioned and removed by armed men if needed. Named no people, but it did not have to. Behind me, I heard a voice say, "About time." I turned. The same man from the mill stood there, thumbs hooked in his belt. A couple of others gathered, reading the notice, frowning the way men do when they mean to nod soon. The man looked at me and waited. The morning had the feel of a stage curtain lifting. I reached into my pocket. My fingers found the woven strip and pressed it against the bone of my hand. The men watched. Somewhere far off, a woodpecker hammered a tired rhythm. I looked at the sign, at the clean letters, at the space left untouched where a person might have written the word welcome. If the world were different. Then I looked at the men, at the town, at the road that once was just a road and now was a border. When I opened my mouth to speak, a shadow passed over us. The men tilted their faces. A hawk circled once and let out a cry so sharp it felt like a warning or a promise. I could not say which. My words held in my throat for one more heartbeat. I drew breath, and the first sentence came. The hawk's cry faded, but the silence it left behind was sharper than any sound. The men still watched me, their eyes asking for an answer, one they could weigh against their own fears. My mouth moved before I could stop it. I said, "Signs don't stop the wind. They don't stop the water. They won't stop people who've been walking this land longer than ink has been drying on railway paper." The words came steady, low, but they carried. The men shifted, glances darting from one face to another, unsure if I had spoken wisdom or folly. The man with the sharp grin gave a small laugh. "Careful," he said. "Talk like that, we'll have folks asking where your loyalties sit. Signs might not stop the wind, but rifles do." He tipped his hat and walked off, leaving the taste of iron behind. The others murmured, not in full agreement, not in full anger either. Suspicion had been planted, though, and I felt the soil of this. Village shifting under my boots. That night, the saloon spilled light and voices into the street. From my cabin window, I could hear fragments. Talk of the railwaymen, of wages, of trouble brewing. My name slipped through once or twice, caught in the current of gossip. I knew then the question the woman had warned me of had already begun. Not in some grand square, but in back corners and over whiskey mugs. And each word I spoke or didn't speak would tilt the scale. I tried to rest, but my mind pulled me back to the grove. Her voice lingered, telling me of a path that could be a stitch or a wound. I wondered what she told her people about me, if she had spoken my name, if her daughter now knew the shape of my face by memory of another's mouth. The woven strip lay on my table, shadows weaving through its threads like a secret. I held it tight and made a choice to walk again to the willows before the sun had fully risen. This time, she was not alone. 3 men stood with her, their faces stern, painted with suspicion and something harder. Their eyes fell on me, as if I had trespassed on more than soil. The woman lifted her hand, quieting them, but the air was already stretched tight. One of the men spoke first. You are the one who touched her wound." His English was rough but clear. "Why?" Answered as plain as I could. "'Cause I saw someone hurt, that's all." "Is not all," he said, stepping closer. "You walked into a story that is not yours. Stories carry weight, they do not let go easy." The woman's eyes stayed on me, waiting to see if I would stand or falter. My voice felt small against the weight of their stares, but I made it steady. "I know I carry something now. Don't yet know what it means, but I will not pretend it is nothing." The man studied me for a long time, then spat into the dirt and stepped back. "Your words are soft," he said. "Soft words feed wolves." The woman spoke then, her voice like water cutting stone. "Soft words can also feed children. Leave it." Her command was not shouted, yet it carried authority. The men turned away, though not without leaving their distrust behind. When they were gone, she stepped closer. "You see now? It is not only your village that questions you. My people ask too. Some say you could be a bridge. Others say a bridge only leads enemies across." Her words carved deep. I thought of the railway sign, of the laughter at the mill, of the whispers in the saloon. Both sides looked at me as if I were a stone in their shoe, yet I could not walk away. "Not now." "Your daughter," I said, careful with the words. "Does she know what you offer?" "She knows," the woman said, "but she has not seen you. She waits." She paused, eyes narrowing as if she searched my soul. "Do not meet her until you are ready to be more than a shadow. Shadows vanish when the fire grows." A daze that followed grew heavy. The railway crew arrived early, iron hammers and rifles slung side by side. Their foreman was a short, wide man with eyes like dull coins. He wasted no time declaring that all land near the tracks now belonged to the Company S Watch. He spoke in blunt terms of order, progress, and discipline. He posted guards near the depot site, men eager for conflict. The village split quick. Some saw fortune in iron rails, others muttered about lost fields and broken peace round campfires. The Apache hunters whispered of hunting grounds shrinking, of water poisoned with sawdust, of children waking from dreams of trains, screaming like spirits. And me, I felt pulled between two rivers, each threatening to sweep me under if I chose wrong. At the mill, the same sharp-tongued man pressed me again. "Tell me, whose side are you on? You speak like a preacher one day, and like a fool that next. Folks want to know if you stand with them, or with those who slip through the brush at night." His eyes held a dare, waiting for me to slip. I gave him no fire that day, only silence. But silence was its own answer. I knew he would carry it back 2 ears, eager for proof. One evening, as I walked home, I saw smoke rising beyond the ridge. Dark, thick, wrong. I hurried, heart pounding. It was not the settlement nor the mill. It was deeper in, near where the willows bent low. When I reached the grove, I found blackened earth, a fire set, and then left to die. The woman was not there, nor the men. Only ashes and tracks in the dirt boots, not moccasins. Railway boots. I stood in the smoke, my chest tight, knowing what? This meant someone had sought to burn away the question before it grew into an answer. To cut the bridge before it spanned. That night I lay awake, the woven strip clenched in my hand, smoke still in my hair. The village felt restless, every sound sharper, every shadow longer. I could hear in my mind the woman's voice. A question would come, small but heavy. I did not yet know where, or how, or by whom, but I knew the fire had been only the beginning. And somewhere out there, unseen, her daughter waited, knowing my name but not my face. The thought kept me from sleep. The way a storm keeps trees from standing still, the smell of burned wood lingered for days. It was carried on the wind like a warning no one could ignore. The grove had been more than a meeting place. It was a line between 2 worlds. Now that line was blackened and broken. Whispers spread through the village before I could even speak of it. Some said the Apaches had burned it themselves as a sign they would not yield. Others claimed it was railway men clearing ground. Each story twisted with fear, and every retelling made me feel the rope tighten around my throat. The railway foreman seized the chance, stood outside the depot site, voice loud, face hard. This is what comes of letting them linger too close, he said, pointing toward the smoke rising from the ridge. They mean to drive us out, one spark at a time. The company won't allow it, and neither should you. His words found ears hungry for certainty, men who wanted a wall to lean against. They nodded, muttered, and some pounded their fists against their knees as if eager for orders. That night, the saloon was alive with talk of rifles, of patrols, of marching out to show strength. I walked past, not daring to go inside, though. I caught my name again, sharper this time, spoken like a question with only one bad answer. My cabin felt small when I closed the door. The woven strip lay on the table, untouched since the fire. I stared at it until my eyes blurred, hearing again the woman's voice. A question will come in front of others. I could feel it drawing. Near like a storm front, close enough to taste. The next morning, the church bell rang early, not for worship, but for gathering. The square filled with men and women, some clutching tools like weapons, others clutching children. At the front stood the railway foreman, flanked by guards with rifles slung easy, their hands too eager on the wood. The foreman spoke of order, of safety, of needing to show strength so the raiders would not think the village weak. He spoke of a patrol at dusk, a march into the brush to clear the ground. Then his coindle eyes found me. He called me forward with a smile that had no warmth. This man here, he said, was seen walking where the fire burned. He knows more than he tells. Folks say he has words with them out there in the shadows. I say he should speak plain. Before all of us, tell us where his loyalties sit. The square went silent. Every eye pressed on me, some sharp, some pleading, some heavy with doubt. The woman's warning hammered in my chest. You will be asked a question in front of others. And here it was. I stepped forward, the woven strip hidden in my pocket, my fingers curled tight around it. I could feel its strength, rough but steady, like a voice urging me not to falter. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard I thought the whole square could hear it. The foreman leaned closer, words slow, sharp as a knife. Do you stand with the railway and the village, or with those who sneak in the dark to set fire to our land? Choose now, in front of everyone. Your silence will speak louder than your tongue. The crowd shifted. Old Harold looked at me with tired eyes, as though begging me not to bring ruin. Mothers clutched their children tighter. The sharp-tongued man from the mill smirked, waiting for me to stumble, sensed somewhere beyond the ridge, unseen, the Apache. Woman and her daughter were waiting too, her future tied to whatever sound left my mouth. I opened my lips, breath trembling, but before I could speak, a shout rang out from the edge of the square. A boy no more than 12 came running, his face white with dust and fear. They're here, he cried. Riders in the brush. I saw them there coming this way. The square erupted in chaos. Men reached for rifles, women pulled children. Close voices tangled into a storm. The foreman barked orders, his face red, his hand raised to signal his guards. And me, I stood frozen, the woven strip cutting into my palm, caught between two tides rushing headlong toward each other. The question still hung in the air, heavier now than ever. All eyes would return to me, and my answer, whatever it was, would set the ground for what came next. The moment stretched, trembling like a bowstring pulled to breaking. The whole village waiting for the arrow to fly. The boy's shout still echoed in my ears, and for a breath it seemed the whole square moved without air. Men grabbed rifles. Women dragged children toward doorways, and the foreman shouted to steady the line. Dust rose beyond the ridge, but whether it was riders or the wind, no one could yet tell. The square's tension coiled tight, and then all eyes swung back to me. The foreman's voice cut above the noise. Speak, man. Say where you stand before it's too late. I could feel the woven strip digging into my palm, threads pressing like roots into the skin. I thought of the Apache woman's steady gaze, of her words about bridges and shadows. I thought of the men in the mill whispering my name like it was a disease, of the smoke at the grove, of the fire someone had set to erase the question before it grew too loud. And I thought of the daughter I had never seen, who waited with nothing but a promise she never asked for. I stepped forward. My voice was raw, but it carried. I don't stand with fire. not with the fire that burned the grove, not with the fire of rifles. I stand with the land itself, the same land we all need to live. You call them raiders, but they are families. Same as you. They want their children fed, same as you. If we answer fire with fire, we'll burn ourselves to ash. The foreman's mouth curled in disgust. Fine words, he said, spitting into the dirt. But words don't stop bullets. You've shown your colors. You side with them. Some in the crowd murmured in agreement, but others hesitated. Old Harold stepped forward, his voice trembling, but strong enough. I've lived through 2 winters of famine. I've seen what happens when we fight everyone who doesn't look like us. Boy's right. Fire breeds fire. His words steadied the air, and others shifted. Unsure now if the foreman's march was the only way forward, before the foreman could speak again. Riders broke through the ridge. Not a war party, not raiders, but 3 Apache elders with the woman among them. They rode slow, not with rifles raised, but with hands open at their sides. The whole square fell into a hush that felt deeper than any bell. Dust swirled between us as they halted at the edge of the gathering. The woman looked straight at me, then at the foreman. Her voice cut clean. We come because smoke lies heavy. Come to ask who set the fire, not us. She turned her gaze. To the crowd, we are tired of graves. Our children are tired of graves. If you want war, you will have it. But if you want peace, then hear us now. The foreman laughed, short and sharp. Peace. While your hunters sneak near our fences, while your eyes watch us from the hills, I'll not trade with thieves. The woman's face hardened. And I'll not kneel to liars who burn our trees and then shout our names as blame. The words hit the square like thunder. The foreman's jaw tightened, and his guards lifted rifles a fraction too high. But the people, my people, hesitated. They had heard enough talk of fire. They had seen enough smoke. I raised my voice once more, heart pounding. The grove burned with boots, not moccasins. Saw the tracks myself. Someone here tried to set us against each other, not them. Ask why the company gains from fear. Ask who profits if we march out to war. The crowd stirred again, this time, with anger pointed not at the riders, but at the foreman. Murmurs turned into shouts. A man near the mill cried out, the boots were railway boots. Another added, we've been fooled. The foreman barked, red-faced, but his voice no longer carried. Too many eyes had turned cold toward him, too many whispers sharpened into truth. The guards shifted uneasily, no longer sure who they were meant to aim at. And in that moment, the balance cracked. The woman rode forward a single step, her horse steady beneath her. You see now, she said to all of us. The bridge can stand or it can fall. Choose. Silence spread, and then old Harold raised his hand. No more fire, he said. We've had enough. Others followed, one by one, until the square carried the same cry. The foreman, cornered, tried to bark orders again, but the guards lowered their rifles and backed away. His power drained with the morning light. He spat, cursed, and stormed off, his men trailing behind. The company would not leave, not yet, but their grip had slipped. When the dust settled, the woman turned to me. For the first time, I saw her soften, though her eyes still carried the weight of storms. You chose to stand, she said. You must carry what follows. She lifted her hand, and from behind her horse stepped a girl. She was younger than I expected. Maybe no more than 17, with dark hair braided tight and eyes that carried both caution and curiosity. She looked at me as though weighing whether I was shadow or substance. I felt my breath catch. This was the daughter, the one who had waited without knowing me. The woman spoke again. You helped me once, and I offered a bond. It is not a gift. Not a chain. It is a path. My daughter will choose if she walks it. She looked at the girl, who held my gaze steady. You have seen his courage? Now decide. The girl did not answer right away. She studied me, then the crowd, then the village. Beyond, at last she spoke, her words simple but sure. I will walk, but not as shadow. only if he walks with respect. Her voice carried a strength that felt older than her years. I nodded, not with pride, but with the humility of someone standing at the edge of something larger than himself. Then I will walk with respect, I said. The village did not cheer. It did not need to. What settled over us was quieter, like rain after a storm, heavy but clean. The railwaymen would remain, the tracks would still carve through the land, and not all hearts were healed. But a bridge had been built, not of stone or timber, but of words and choices. It would hold as long as we tended it. In the weeks that followed, the village changed. The foreman, stripped of trust, found fewer ears willing to listen. The company pressed on, but with less fire in their grip. Trade began to flow in cautious step stools for food, stories for stories. Suspicion did not vanish, but it softened, like a wound beginning to scar. I walked often with the woman and her daughter. We spoke little at first, learning each other's silences before daring to fill them with words. The bond grew not from promises, but from shared ground, from water fetched at the same stream, from watching the same hawk circle overhead. One evening, as the sun set red across the hills, the girl looked at me and said, "The bridge stands for now. The bridges must be walked, or they rot." Words struck deep, reminding me that nothing was ever truly finished. It was work every day to choose peace over fire. And so, the story ended not with victory, but with a path. A path walked by many feet, some hesitant, some sure, all carrying the weight of a choice made that day in the square. The grove would regrow in time, shoots rising from the ashes, the way hope always does when tended with care. I kept the woven strip with me, not as a token of debt, but as a reminder that a question asked in front of others can shape, more than a man's fate, can shape a whole land's. And when the wind carried the sound of rails hammering into the earth, I listened, not with fear, but with the steady resolve of one who had chosen to stand as a bridge, knowing bridges are never built once, but built again and again with every step.